This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources. Consistent with its running right process, Alpha is an energy company committed to being a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward. We fuel progress around the world. More information at alphanr.com.
Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, on Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Taking it to the streets and helping our community. Intelligent Illuminations. We make streetlights smart and give you control, providing secure point-to-point wireless solutions for roadway and area lighting, helping you manage, monitor, and control your streetlights. More information at ilooms.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com.
It's amazing what my students with special needs can accomplish. Their pride is priceless. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a welcome back to Secretary John Harvey, Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs.
Yes, sir.
And it seems like the first time we had the opportunity to talk on this program was about the time that your title, your job title, the Secretariat name had changed.
Right.
Because when the governor first appointed you and confirmed by the General Assembly in the 2014, you had a different title.
Right.
But in the shifting of matters and giving, I think, more priority to veterans and defense affairs, the title was changed.
Right. I think it was a very smart move. We had seen before the governor was inaugurated, Secretary Moran and I had an opportunity to review this JLARC study that was done, a very, very good study. And one of their recommendations was that the Homeland Security portfolio ought to be moved over to public safety so that he would have policy and then the formulation of policy and then the execution of it, you know, with the Department of Emergency Management, the National Guard and the State Police and all the other agencies that Secretary Moran oversees. Made eminent sense to me, and it also supported what the governor wanted to do, which was give increased influence to veterans and the defense affairs within the Commonwealth. So it turned out, I think, to be a real win-win for Secretary Moran and I, for the governor, and for the people of Virginia. Made an awful lot of sense.
So it's easy to say that you're the first Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs in the Commonwealth.
Yes, I think I'll put that on my my tombstone.
The very first. And if I could do a shout out to the former Governor Holton, the whole cabinet system is not that old. There are still some of us alive in the Commonwealth, and in fact many of people that remember that prior to his term in office in the 1970s, there was not a cabinet in Virginia. So
right. No, it's really fascinating. You know, I was a stranger to state government before Governor McAuliffe asked me to take on this position, and it's just been a fascinating year for me. I mean, almost 15 months now, but just fascinating learning about everything here in Richmond, state government, how it works with the cities, the counties, the civic organizations, how things get done. And one of the things that you just talked about was if you go over to the Patrick Henry building and then you see the pictures of all the cabinets going back, well, all of a sudden there was just this very small, at one point there was this very small group of people around the governor, And then obviously under Governor Holton, you shifted to a cabinet formation, a cabinet organization, and then you saw the cabinet gradually expand as the issues changed for the Commonwealth. So it's very interesting to see it all right in front of you unfolding.
It is. It would be interesting for people who don't walk that hallway almost to see those pictures after pictures and to realize it's not a tremendously long hallway to get all those in. It's really not. So it has been, as you were saying, a very busy 15 months. As you reflect on how busy it's been, the issues, what would be one of the things that would be kind of at the top of your list that's...
I think for me personally, this has been extraordinarily rewarding, and I didn't know how rewarding it was going to be. The governor came in, gave me a great opportunity, but he also was very, very serious about wanting to make a difference in the Commonwealth for the veterans and for the relationship we have with the armed forces in the state and our support for the people. Over 275,000 active duty service members and their family members live in Virginia, call Virginia home, and then over 800,000 veterans. And we have the fastest growing veterans population in the United States, the fastest growing veterans population under the age of 28. So we have this new generation, the post-911 generation of veterans coming in. And when you look at what the governor was talking about, find common ground, develop this new Virginia economy to look to the future, see that our reliance, our extraordinary reliance on the defense budget was not a good place for the state to be for the foreseeable future. How do you deal with that? How do you make a difference? And so I think his approach with the new Virginia economy, which will be based on what? A new Virginia workforce. And the core of that workforce is going to be the young men and women coming into this state as veterans, as new veterans, who bring all their talents, skills, and abilities they've gained in the armed forces in their tour, bring that home to Virginia, get them integrated into our communities, and have them be that foundation for that new workforce that's going to sustain the new economy. So he painted this picture. You know, we're filling it in right now and working very hard to do so, but it's a great mission, and I feel like it is a mission. I'm a mission kind of guy. You know, that's 39 and a half years in the Navy. You're focused on the mission and the people who accomplish it. And I'm very grateful to the governor for having given me this opportunity. He's given me a great mission that fits in with his program, and he's backed it up 100%, and I'm very grateful for that.
When you came into office, there was a program that had been started, I think a V3 program. Is it still going forward, or has it
absolutely.
changed?
It's going gangbusters. This is the Virginia Values Veterans Program, and this was started in June of 2012. And it was a way that how does the state not just focus on the veteran who needs the job, but how do we help employers find veterans, the kind of veterans they need for the kind of jobs they have? Because there are a lot of companies that wanted to do the right thing, but they're not like Dominion Power and have a big, huge human resource organization. But they needed, how do we find these men and women, and how do we get a hold of them? And how do we bring them in? How do we understand those skills that translate exactly to what they need? So the V3 program was started, and it has gone tremendously. We have over 8,000 jobs as a result of that program that people are in right now, and we got about another 4,000 that are pledged to be filled. And in this last General Assembly session, we had a great piece of legislation that the governor sponsored that was passed through the General Assembly and is in the budget to give a grant to the small businesses that hire up to 10 of them, hire up to 10 veterans, a grant for $1,000 per veteran for the ones they hire and retain for 1 year. Because the V3 program had done very well at reaching the big companies, the mid-sized companies. And I looked at it and I said, we're missing the great engine of America's economy, small businesses. So we went around and built a coalition in the General Assembly. The governor was fully behind it, sponsored the bill, and so we got this passed just this last session. And I think it's going to have a very, very large impact on veterans hiring into their first jobs, which is how they learn, how they get into the community, and how they learn and what kind of their path is going to be to the future.
So for the small business people who are who may be hearing this for the first time, they don't need to wait, but they can start employing at any time.
You can hire a veteran anytime. That's okay.
But the $1,000 begins what after
1 July.
Yes.
1 July,
Yes.
and then you go in and you hold on to that individual for a year. You do it for 10 veterans, and we'll give you $10,000 for that. But you'll get far more than that in the value of hiring. We have a veteran that has a job and is now contributing to the economy, so it's a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, well, that certainly would be a unique way of trying to get the attention of small business people.
Right,
Really,
yes, sir. We hope that'll work that way.
Yes, really will. And you said something about that we have the largest number of
Young veterans.
young veterans
Right.
of any of the states.
Correct. I mean, it's just amazing, but when you look at the facts on the ground here in the Commonwealth, 1 out of every 8 citizens is a veteran. 1 out of every 8. And the conflicts for the past 13, 14 years have generated enormous number of new veterans. Over 3 million have served over that period of time. And we have the fastest growing population of those new veterans, the post-9/11 generation of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen coming back to Virginia. It makes sense. We have an awful lot of them who are stationed here and then stay here. And then Virginia has a tradition that goes back to before the Revolution that, Virginians serve in their military and are proud to do so. And that's been good for hundreds of years. And so we have a tradition of service, and now we have a responsibility to those who have served to help them come back home and get their lives started again.
Another one of the issues that your office and the governor has really been charging you and others who work with is the homelessness. Is this mainly of the older veterans then?
This is all encompassing. It has been for many years an intractable issue, but it's fascinating that over the last 5 years, there were a couple of programs out in a couple of states, in Phoenix, Arizona, and Salt Lake City, that pioneered a new approach to dealing with veterans' homelessness. The one thing about it, when you're a veteran, you also you have access to state and federal aid that other folks in that situation would not have. And so if you could identify them and then bring them in and protect them, not try to solve the problem right away, but first get them safe and secure off the street, then you can bring the resources to bear. And so we've pioneered this in Virginia, and we've had tremendous success since the governor signed on for the mayor's challenge against homelessness. Governor McAuliffe was the first governor to sign up to say we're going to end veterans homelessness in Virginia essentially by the end of this year, by the end of 2015, and we are on track to do so. Now the key to this has been the folks at the tip of the spear and the cities, the local resources that are there, but then how we help them interact, say, with housing and urban development to get a voucher that will enable us to house the veteran while they then go after whatever the problem was that put that veteran on the street. So it's an all-in type of approach between the state, the cities, local organizations, providers of services, out to the people who actually go out on the street and find these men and women. They're of all ages and races out there. It's not just older, Vietnam-era guys.
It's not
young
older,
families that we'll find on the street because an illness or a bad turn economically,
right.
Puts them in a very difficult situation. So, but it's something we're able to deal with, and I think that we're dealing with it successfully. And I think it's going to be a great good news story. It already is, but I think it's going to be a great good news story for the Commonwealth later on this year. When I go to the governor, I say, we've done it. We've got them off the streets and we got them secure.
Yeah. Something that makes a great deal of news nationally and in Virginia and everywhere has to do with the challenges that veterans have coming back from being in battle. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure in your years in the Navy, you're no stranger to that. You know about that. Is this something that's being addressed nationally or by states or? I
think every state probably has an approach. Certainly the Veterans Administration does, but one of the things that you find is that everyone comes back. Everyone who is in combat was affected by it in some way. But it's not always a disorder. As my friend General Mattis says, Marine Corps General, he says it shouldn't be post-traumatic stress disorder. It's really just post-traumatic stress. That's normal. It's a human reaction to the intensity of that experience. So we have many men and women coming back who have been in the combat zone for quite a period of time. They're all dealing with it. In Virginia, we have, under our Department of Veteran Services, we have our Wounded Warrior program, where we can reach out and touch those who need extra assistance that perhaps they haven't gotten from the VA. You know, we've all read and seen all the stories of the VA medical issues, you know, the long wait times for appointments, you know, the lack of resources perhaps to get at this problem, getting it properly diagnosed, et cetera. And it's not just limited to the newest veterans. I mean, this has been true of veterans ever since the Revolutionary War. We just haven't always recognized it and tried to deal with it. But we are now, I think in Virginia in particular, the governor's put the resources behind it. He certainly has put the entire body of the government, between myself and Secretary Hazel, Health and Human Services. We have a lot we can put at this problem to help our veterans out who come to us and need some assistance. But it's not something that I think the bulk of the people should look at and say, and we talked about this before, I think, you know, this image of the veteran, you know, this ticking time bomb waiting to go off. You know, that's not the case. The vast majority of our veterans come back stronger for their experience, more mature, ready to integrate into the society, ready to build their lives in our communities. And I'm very, very grateful for that because we need them to come back with us.
You know, that was on my mind last night and again this morning, and anticipating talking with you from one of the PBS Masterpiece shows that started its new season. And this was at World War I, and one of the key characters in there was one who was having flashbacks to terrible scenes. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking that years ago that wasn't addressed as much as it is now.
Oh, absolutely not.
And if they'd been doing this program back 20 or 30 years ago, they wouldn't even have had
Nobody
that.
would have talked about it. It was a hidden problem that was just hidden from public view. And people either dealt with it or they didn't.
Yeah. But I think it's an extremely important point that you make, particularly for employers and others to be aware that there's a very small portion of that population, and there's help available for them now when maybe a few decades ago it wasn't.
Right. We have a great deal of help in the public and the private sector now, and a lot of people in the private sector are coming forward saying there's this Give an Hour program where people in the private sector will simply donate blocks of time that a veteran can go up and say, sit down and talk and get at some of the issues that they may be dealing with.
We want to encourage people to go on your website, and it has a very short 4-letter name. It's easy if they think about Veterans and Defense Affairs, VADA.virginia.gov. And if they go on that site, then they can get all the kinds of information, more than we'll have time to talk about.
Right, and so I hope people do go on that site. There's lots of things if you're a veteran, and if you just want to help out with veterans, there's information for you there too.
Yeah, so the other part that spend some of your time talking with is Defense Affairs and what's happening there, because there is concern at times in the Commonwealth of Virginia about our losing.
Right. I think I understand that concern, particularly after in 2005, there was this process called Base Realignment and Closure, BRAC. And lots of people are very familiar with it and some aren't. But it was a process by which the armed services said, okay, here are the bases, because we've shrunk the armed forces, we don't need all these bases and installations we used to have. Now in Virginia, where we have 19 major bases and installations, and as I said earlier, over 285,000 servicemen, women, and their family members living here, really significant installations in terms of the nation's military capability. This is a big deal here in Virginia. But I'm very, very confident that the future will be kind to us in this regard. I'll give you an example if we have time for that.
Yes.
On this last fall, President Obama ordered the United States Armed Forces to respond and start striking the Islamic State. The forces that did that were all from Virginia. Day one, the F-22, the Air Force's newest fighter, was flying out. It was from Langley, forward deployed to the Middle East, and they were on the day one, night one of those strikes. The Navy planes were flying off the carrier George H.W. Bush, homeported at Norfolk, and they were homeported at Oceana. The intelligence work was done out at Ravenna Station, for the National Ground Intelligence Center and the Defense Intelligence Agency out by UVA in Charlottesville. So all of Virginia had the most relevant and ready forces for the most latest go-round, sadly, that we're involved in terms of the use of military force. And so that just gives you a great example. Special operations training has greatly expanded here in the Commonwealth. So we're, I think, in a very strong position to withstand any kind of a process that comes out. And in fact, at Quantico, at Belvoir, and in Norfolk, and in several other locations, we're still building from the last round, which made more investments in the state. So people understandably get very nervous when they hear that BRAC word. And I understand the reason why. I, for one, am very confident that if another process like that comes out, Virginia will do very well in it.
Well, now that's certainly some encouraging word, and it shows the diversity that we have here in Virginia with the military, that we're not just one branch.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That is.
And we have very big commands at Fort Eustis. There's the Training and Doctrine Command, a Army 4-star who determines the future. That's where they do the future of the Army. At Langley, we have Air Combat Command, who controls all the air combat forces for the entire Air Force. General Perkins is at Eustis, General Carlisle is at ACC in Langley, and Admiral Phil Davidson, a 4-star admiral down at Fleet Forces Command in Norfolk, who controls all the deployed forces for the United States Navy. So we have and the headquarters for the entire East Coast of the Coast Guard is in Norfolk, Virginia. So we have very significant high-level commands here that I think portend well for how the armed forces view Virginia for the future.
Well, we're certainly fortunate that the governor got you into the Commonwealth in this position. And we were talking before we started taping that in your years prior to coming here, you probably spent 15 or so at sea?
Yes, out of 39 and a half years in the Navy, I actually spent at sea, underway, way far away, about a total of 15 years. And then a number more years on board a ship where we weren't out underway. So it's quite a bit of time doing something else, but I'm very proud to be part of the governor's team here and able to do the work that he's set forward for us to do.
So in our closing couple of minutes, what would you like to underscore that you think that people around the Commonwealth ought to be doing to help and be a part of this mission?
Well, that's really great, and I appreciate that question. I think, number one, the tradition in Virginia of support for the veteran, not as a handout, not as a charity, not as an object of, oh, pity, the poor veteran had to serve, but as someone who returns to Virginia, with tremendous capabilities to offer and wanting to build their lives in our community. And I think there's a role for every citizen of the Commonwealth, to find a way to reach out and help get that veteran started on a path to employability. We have an extraordinary community college system that's doing amazing things for our veterans all across the Commonwealth. So our university system has stepped up. The community college system has really stepped up. Our employers in the V3 program are coming together to help find the jobs. But I think the key thing is going to be how our citizens view this and the support for the programs that help the veterans come in and reintegrate and return to the community. And I just hope that our citizens do what the citizens of Virginia have always done. Not only have Virginians served, but they've taken good care of the folks who've come back, again, not because it's a charity case, but because, hey, these folks are coming back and they're going to help us make this state better and better for the future.
And these people are our family members, they're our neighbors, and they're our friends and our colleagues at work.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no one who can't find a way to do something that won't take much time, won't take any money, but just a little bit of effort, and you can do an awful lot to help out the veteran coming back to Virginia and getting a great start in a great Commonwealth.
You know, when I first had the opportunity to meet you, I referred to you as Admiral, and that is your title in which
Right.
you have earned over the years and the stars that you have earned. But we're delighted also that you're now Secretary, Mr. Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs. And thank you again for being on This Week in Richmond, and we look forward to having you on again.
Well, it's always fun to be here. You know, I've learned so much from you. I mean, you've got a little bit of time around this place as well, and you've been very, very helpful to me in navigating the passages of power here in Richmond, and I appreciate that a great deal.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com.
Alpha Natural Resources, a leader in mine safety and an environmental steward.
Haley Buick GMC in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Intelligent Illuminations, helping you manage, monitor, and control your street lights. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.